Good evening from Government Buildings, where Micheál Martin is back in the Taoiseach's office. Tonight, we'll reflect on a dramatic 48 hours here and assess what it all means for stability and delivery over the next 5 years. Coming up...
So I'm proposing we suspend the Dáil now. That's my proposal.
Deputy Carter, you're out of order. Please resume your seat. Please allow...
Unprecedented scenes in the Dáil as opposition parties made their voices heard, forcing a delay in the appointment of a new government. Has the tone been set for the next 5 years?
If we want to see our country united, we first of all have to learn how to share it.
Yesterday's performance, as to use your word, was a disgrace. And I think it wasn't constructive opposition, it was chaotic opposition.
We've never had more TDs in the Oireachtas than we have today for the last 100 years, and we're going to make sure that that presence will be felt by the government.
And even if it turns out to be a bump in the road, what might be the big obstacles the government has to overcome?
The very worst decisions, Mark, are taken in what appear to be the best of times.
David McWilliams will bring us his thoughts not only on the challenges to the Irish economy, but also this prediction about what might happen in London and the consequences for both Belfast and Dublin.
If I were a betting man, I wouldn't bet against the IMF being called into the UK sometime in the next 24 months.
Everyone here around Government Buildings in Dublin is taking a deep breath after the events of the past couple of days, but the focus will turn quickly to the challenges ahead. We'll be bringing you a real sense of both of those stories this evening in a series of interviews. First up is Fianna Fáil, the single biggest party in the Dáil and the lead partner in the new coalition. I asked the senior TD, Charlie McConnell-Logue, about the administration's rocky start.
Yeah, I think it was very unfortunate what we seen in the Dáil yesterday, and certainly not what you expect following on from an election campaign and the constitutional duty we all have to elect a Taoiseach. And certainly there was lots of theatrics around that. There was ways forward for the issues that were there to be dealt with. It was unfortunate how it evolved. But listen, today has been a wonderful day. I'd like to pass on our congratulations to the Taoiseach. It's great to see the new government in place. I think we have a very strong programme for government now, and really looking forward to getting on with the work and with the election behind us.
You now know, however, this is an opposition that means business.
Well, it's a government that means business, and I think the government will be a government that progresses with their eye firmly on actually making progress and addressing the issues that are there, with none of the type of dramatics that we might have seen in the Dáil yesterday. We'll be very respectful, as the new Taoiseach said in his address after he was elected today, of everyone's role within the Oireachtas, and indeed of everyone's role within society, and trying to represent them well. And I think the programme for government is one now that we have a strong, solid Dáil majority to work through and to work on and to implement, and that's a key job of work ahead of us now.
You will know very well that a lot has been said and a lot has been written in recent days and weeks about a certain whiff, perhaps, that surrounds this new administration of secret deals and understandings. And of course, one of the key architects of the arrangement is a controversial TD with a colourful past. Are you entirely comfortable with that?
I'm very comfortable with the programme for government we have and the very stable Dáil majority we have. I think every TD who signed up to it was elected by their constituency, and we were just as Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael one vote off a Dáil majority. I think we now have a very strong Dáil majority as a result of the number of independents that are signed up, with 5 independent TDs as ministers in this government as well. And there's no secret deals. The only deal in place is the programme for government, which sets out the pathway for this country over the next 5 years, and which this new government will now focus on implementing.
Well, there are people who think, of course, that independents are giving their support because they believe that they will get something for their constituents. Is that not how it works?
No, what everyone has signed up to is the programme for government. And certainly we will work now as a government to work on behalf of every constituency in the country, and also in terms of all people within society. And I think independents and government have been very clear that there is no secret deals, that the programme for government is what everyone has signed up to. And we will all work collectively now to make real progress right across the country, but particularly on the programme for government, which we've all set out as the programme for this 5-year government.
A lot of it, of course, is very aspirational. We would like to deliver, we hope to deliver, we will examine this in detail. You've got to deliver on issues like housing and health and education. You've got to deal with a migration issue. Those are all Very challenging issues for this new administration,
Yeah.
aren't they?
Yes, there's lots of challenging issues. Now, there's lots of the programme for government which is very specific as well, and it is very comprehensive in that it covers all sectors and issues which we want to make progress on. By its nature, it does not go into the big detail in terms of how particular objectives are going to be delivered. That's a matter now for the new ministers that will be in place to work and put comprehensive strategies in place for that. But what this is the programme which everyone is signing up to and which we'll all work collectively through good times and bad to keep working on in order to make sure that we actually achieve that. The means by which we do it will be a matter for each minister working with his team and ministers of state.
And can I just ask you finally, how important is the debate on Irish unity as far as your party is concerned? Because it's not clearly a priority. It's not in the programme for government.
It's very important, but as the Taoiseach, our new Taoiseach set out at the start of the last government, if we want to see our country united, we first of all have to learn how to share it. And that's something, as somebody who lives right on the border, I know and feel very much. As somebody who's from a border county in Donegal, we have so much work to do in terms of sharing services, sharing the island in which we live, and that's why we've come up with the Shared Island Initiative, because we have to respect all traditions in the country, but we have to bring everyone together through the shared objective of living in a way that serves everyone in the country. And I think we've seen good progress in that over the last 4 years. This programme for government sets out very clearly that we're going to double down further on pushing forward in terms of the Shared Island Initiative, and also in some really important cross-border initiatives which are mentioned in the programme for government, such as, for example, delivering the A5 and also restoring, for example, the Derry to Dublin air route, which is a very specific commitment in the programme for government too.
But anybody talking about a border poll is being unhelpful. Is that the bottom line?
As I say, I think we have to first learn how to share our island. I know as somebody coming from Donegal, the option, for example, of being able to access health services in Northern Ireland, the option in relation to being able to share education services, we've so much work to do in that, and it's only by bringing everyone together that we see the benefits of living in the one island, sharing the one island, and working so well together that we can actually make progress then towards unity.
Is Fianna Fáil still the Republican Party?
Very much so. We're a party which founded this state, and as the new Taoiseach said here today, we should not take for granted in any way the freedoms we have, the great value we have in this country in a time of much uncertainty around the world, to be able to set our own pathway democratically and in a way that actually serves everyone equally, and in a way that which builds towards as well looking after and sharing our island really well. And that's something that this government and Fianna Fáil in particular and our Republican ethos is very much a core part of what we're about.
Fianna Fáil's Charlie McConalogue. The economist David McWilliams is no stranger to a headline, and we'll hear his thoughts on what could happen next in the United Ireland debate shortly. But when I met up with him earlier this week, I began by asking him about what he sees as the advantages and the challenges in this government inheriting such a strong economy.
It's enormously important because it's a complete outlier in Europe now. Ireland is growing, I'd say GDP 4 or 5%, massive budget surplus, debt GDP ratio is collapsing, i.e. falling. There were about 1 million people at work 15, 18 years ago. There's now nearly 2 million people at work. The population is rising. So all of those metrics, it couldn't be a better time to be in government. But one of the problems with these good times is that in economics and in politics, sometimes the very worst decisions, Mark, are taken in what appear to be the best of times. When you have a lot of money, you can blow it very easily. So I think there is a sense that yes, the economy is roaring ahead. Yes, there is no problem with finance, but there's a problem with capacity. That is like, are you actually able to build? Or is the economy running too hot? I know it's strange, to say maybe to a northern audience or if you're talking about Britain, where how could you possibly run the economy too hot? But there is maybe an argument thinking, hold on a second. We have big problems in the housing market. We have anybody in Dublin will tell you how long they're stuck in traffic. We have massive problems in the health sector in terms of being able to build the hospitals we want. Houses are beyond the reach of most people. So in a way, sometimes economics focuses on problems of demand. Ireland has problems of supply. So it's a very different type of government that you need to be if your problems are supply driven.
I want to talk about a couple of big key policy areas that are likely to be real challenges for this coalition in the next 5 years. We'll talk about immigration in a moment or two, but housing has to be the number one challenge.
So housing is, has been, will be the number one challenge for this country. There is a delivery problem here. There's not a demand problem, there's not a finance problem. There's about 150 billion euros on deposit stuck in our banking system, which could be used for mortgages, which could be used to refinance housing. So it's not a finance problem, it's not a demand problem, it's a supply problem. It's a, can we build these houses in the right place, at the right price, at the right time? Now that demands an enormous effort on the part of the state. Most states would call this is state capacity. Can you free up land? Can you make that land available? Can you service that land? And can you build as quickly as possible? This is the only issue for this government because it's the only issue that really animates people.
Do you have any reason to believe that this is a government that can do all of that or any of that?
Look, it has to realise that the interests of landowners and the interests of property owners are at odds with the interest of those people locked out. So basically it's a problem in Ireland, which is when you don't have a house, you want house prices to fall. The minute you buy a house, you want house prices to rise because we regard them as wealth. So you're pitting one sector of the society against the other. And where people are feeling this most is in the age between 20 and 40, because home ownership has collapsed in the last 15 years in this age. They are emigrating in significant numbers, and they are saying the reason they're emigrating is they don't want to live in the box room at home with their mum and dad. They want to grow up. So what we're seeing is people are having children later, they're settling down later, they're having smaller families, all of this. So the impact of housing on the social fabric of the country is enormous and can never be underplayed. Now, in order to fix this, this government, and I know Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil have rarely in the past been anything other than supporters of the housing lobby. They have to move against that. And they have to realise that housing and construction is an industry like any other that needs to be supported if it's doing well, but equally punished if it is facilitating hoarding of land, if it's facilitating not building quick enough. So this government lives and dies, or rises and falls on the issue of housing. Target is about 50,000 houses a year. Just to put that in perspective, that is a city the size of Waterford every year into perpetuity. So that gives you a sense, right, of the challenge that requires infrastructure, transport, and facing down enormous lobbies which are anti-planning, anti-development, and are saying, not in my backyard. So in a way, this government has to face down its own electorate in order to actually liberate the other part of the electorate.
Immigration is also a real challenge for this incoming coalition. Do you think that the next couple of years potentially could be as toxic as the past couple of years have been as far as this issue is concerned?
It's interesting. In the election, immigration was the dog that barked but didn't bite. So the anti-immigrant parties probably all, I suspect, lost their deposit. So when asked, do you want to be anti-immigration? The average Irish person said, no, we don't buy that. We're not racist. We're not anti-immigrant. However, I can tell you that it's the conversation that people have in their kitchens and they're having in the pubs, right? So can you, and it's all related, can you build the amount of houses that you need in the right place, at the right time, at the right price, if you are consistently absorbing in tens of thousands of new migrants? The answer is no. That's very, very clear. So either we go hell for leather for building and we keep an open borders policy in effect, or you suppress immigration in one way, or at one level, and you allow the economy to breathe. And these are the big issues, because the thing is, if you walk into any Irish hospital, hospitals can't survive without immigrants. So it's not as if you can actually change the status quo without actually changing people's everyday lives, but it has to be done.
I just want to talk finally, David, about the big overarching conversation around constitutional change, the possibility of a border poll. The former Taoiseach and Fine Gael leader Leo Varadkar's made it very clear. He thinks that a debate about a border poll needs to be central to the public conversation. Is he right? Do you think that is going to happen? Or is it something perhaps we obsess with in Northern Ireland, but people down here spend much less time talking about?
I think we spend less time, much less time talking about it.
Is it still an issue, though?
It is an issue in the sense that there is an emotional attachment to the notion of a united Ireland. I happen to believe, as an economist, that there's a very good economic case for a united Ireland, a long-term case. But I do think that in the last 12 months, it has been much less significant than it was prior to this.
Why do you think that's the
Well,
case?
I think Brexit annoyed people here, right? Brexit seemed to us, certainly a lot of the anti-Irish sentiments coming out of the Brexiteers and the Tory party, that annoyed people. And I think people said, well, hold on a second. It's very, very clear that in a Brexit vote, the majority of Northerners didn't want it. So that gives a green light to a unification discussion, right? That's the first thing. Second thing is the economy is doing so well here, people need the capacity. Like the North is a massive capacity for the South, and we need it, right? But I think one thing that's looming, which will bring it back on the agenda, is I think that Britain, there's a very significant chance. If I were a betting man, I wouldn't bet against the IMF being called into the UK sometime in the next 24 months. I think at the moment, the UK is finding it very difficult to finance itself. So let's say the rate of interest on gilts are 5%, the economy is growing at 0%. The economist in me knows that that's when debt markets go out of control. There is a serious, serious problem about Britain financing itself in the next 12 to 18 months. I think there is a likelihood that you will see a crisis in sterling, a crisis in the gilt market, and that will force a massive fiscal change in Whitehall. That then will percolate right down into Northern Ireland, because Northern Ireland is so dependent on Whitehall for its day-to-day income, and that I think will change again the debate. So if Brexit, for example, 5 years ago, elevated the debate about unity, I think a gilt crisis in the UK will also have not exactly the same, but a very similar impact on the discussion.
It's a very interesting issue that you raise, and you're ahead of the posse in floating that idea. So it's going to be very interesting to see if that does indeed come to pass. Your point is that if that happens, it makes the union less attractive to some people, not everybody, but to some people in Northern Ireland. It strengthens the case for unity, does it?
It strengthens the case for unity. What it means is, I mean, the whole debate about unity, as you know, there's many strands in it, but one of the strands has to be whether or not the quality of life in Northern Ireland and the standard of living in Northern Ireland can be maintained. And if that's not the case, surely then many people in Northern Ireland will say, hold on a second, those people down south, they have their problems, but they're doing far better. Why don't we join with them? I mean, you know, there's one thing, you know, every time I'm up in Belfast obviously changed completely, but where are the big multinationals? Where are the big high-end jobs? Where are the big value-added jobs? Where is the pathway for your average 19-year-old in the north to say, I'm going to stay here and I'm going to work in this area and I'm going to travel and I'm going to work in an international area and I'm going to be plugged in and my job is going to take me places and I feel I'm moving forward? That is not evident to me. And if, for example, you get a gilt crisis in the UK, which changes the fiscal policy, which will have a massive impact on austerity in the UK, because you will have to have austerity after a guilt crisis. And austerity means the people who depend on government get hit more than the people who don't. And in Northern Ireland, you have a significant amount of people who depend on government. So I think this is something that people aren't talking about. It has the ability, or it has the capability to change the debate in the United Kingdom and change the debate with respect to Northern Ireland. It's very clear to me.
It's fascinating to hear your thoughts, as always. David McWilliams, thank you very much.
Cheers, Mark.
The economist David McWilliams, and let's stick with the subject of constitutional change. The Tyrone-born Fine Gael TD Emer Curry is her party's Northern Ireland spokesperson. What does she make of recent comments by the former Taoiseach Leo Varadkar, which were critical of the programme for government's approach to the issue?
Well, firstly, I think the Shared Island Unit is massively important and has been a huge benefit to the island. And there will be an increased investment of $1 billion, which is very positive to see that work continue. But I think in the round, the programme for government document is really about back to basics with the Good Friday Agreement. It very much focuses on the implementation of the Good Friday Agreement, the institutions and the three strands, and relationships. So I think the focus in the document has been on the Good Friday Agreement and rebuilding relationships. But that doesn't mean that we can't continue to discuss unity or constitutional change or what I view as the move towards a new Ireland.
The message maybe to Northern nationalists is that a full-blown conversation about, for example, the date of a border poll is one that this administration wouldn't particularly welcome. That's not the way you are steering this conversation at the moment, is it?
Well, I think we've been very clear in our party that we don't like this conversation being steered in terms of a hard date or a hard outcome. So if it is about committing to a date for a border poll, then no, you're not going to find that in the programme for government, because we don't believe that's the way to do business.
Your former party leader, former Taoiseach Leo Varadkar, of course, writing in the Sunday Times, was suggesting that maybe it should be a bigger priority. It needs to be front and centre of how this new administration moves forward. Has he got that wrong?
Well, I think when Leo Varadkar speaks and contributes on any issue that you listen. But let's bring it back, Mark, to the Fine Gael manifesto, which states very clearly that unification is our objective. And that remains. But the programme for government is a document between three parties, and in this instance it is, I think, focusing on the implementation of the Good Friday Agreement, the importance of the Good Friday Agreement, and bringing those relationships together. And also in Leo's article he does mention about how things can change in the UK, can change in the EU, and it is about resilience. And that's what the Good Friday Agreement brings us. It is about resilience in those relationships.
What's the message to unionists then, perhaps watching this interview tonight? Can they relax? Because this is not something that's going to come and surprise them and bite them when they least expect it over the next 5 years at least?
I think the message to unionists is the same as it always is, which is that Dublin is a welcome place. It wants to discuss the future with you. It wants to work with you in relation to the shared island objective. So that hasn't changed.
The last 48 hours have been pretty bruising for the coalition parties, and some people would say for politics in the Republic of Ireland as well, an opposition that was very determined to make its point. Do you think that's a sign of things to come?
Well, I think yesterday's performance, as to use your word, was a disgrace. And I think it wasn't constructive opposition, it was chaotic opposition. And I'm pleased to be here today to fulfil my duty as a TD to be part of nominating a Taoiseach. But that should have happened yesterday.
It is now about delivery, and if you don't deliver, those who voted for your party and for the other coalition parties will be extremely annoyed about that, and you will have a price to pay potentially in 5 years' time. So if you don't deliver on housing, if you don't deliver on education and on health and all of the other issues that are listed in the programme for government, there will be consequences.
Yes, Mark, there will be, and that's why I'm here. That's why I wanted to get to Dáil Éireann, so I could deliver for the people of Dublin West and for the people of Ireland, all of Ireland. So that's what brings you into politics. So I'm ready for that challenge. Fine Gael is ready for that challenge, so is Simon Harris, and I think the programme for government gives us a positive roadmap to do that, and we want to get on and do it.
And you are a newbie. You're just taking up the role as a TD. You served in the Senate before. Are you still pinching yourself that you have this new role, or has the shine been taken off it by what happened yesterday?
No, not at all. I think when I was a member of the Seanad, I pinched myself every time I walked through those gates, and I'll be pinching myself every time I walk through those doors. Never underestimate the honour and privilege it is to sit in those seats, and I think that's why yesterday was so disappointing, because I feel like they let down the Oireachtas and they let down the Parliament with that behaviour. As I said, it should be about constructive opposition, not chaotic opposition.
The newly elected Fine Gael TD Emer Curry. Lucinda Crichton is a former Minister for Europe who now runs a PR consultancy. When she joined me yesterday, just before the dramatic events in the Dáil Chamber began to unfold, I asked her about the controversy over Michael Lowry's involvement in the government formation and the claims of transactional politics involving independent TDs like the Healy-Raes.
The Occupied Territories Bill! The Occupied Territories Bill! The Occupied Territories Bill!
I mean, it's the nature of politics, isn't it? We've had previous governments that depended on independence, and those independents secured deals for their constituencies, projects for their constituencies. It's what's expected.
Is it not in breach of the Ethics and Public Office Acts, which really were established because of things that had happened in the past to stop some constituencies benefiting over others because of partisan interests that ministers might have? It should be transparent.
It has to be transparent, and arguably any announcements around infrastructure, any announcements around projects in specific constituencies will be scrutinised by the Oireachtas. Marion Harkin, I heard, one of the independents who's likely to be a junior minister, I heard her on the radio the other day talking about projects, very openly about projects she wants for her constituency in the Northwest, all of which she says, are evidence-based in terms of the need, the population demand, regional investment requirements, etc. So let's see. But I mean, the idea that that support for the government from independent TDs wouldn't be dependent on outcomes that they can see and that they can actually point to as successes for them, I think is just naive, to be honest. My views on Michael Lowry and the findings of the tribunal are very well documented. I introduced legislation, private members' legislation, as a TD seeking to mandate the government to implement the recommendations of the tribunal. So look, I mean, my views on it are sort of irrelevant in a sense. The bottom line is that these are people who top the poll in their constituencies. They have a mandate from their electorate, same as every other TD in the Dáil, and they're entitled to be part of whatever arrangement. It's for Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil to determine whether they want to do business with them.
Is it good for democracy that this government has someone like Michael Lowry so close to the centre of power?
I think there'll be plenty of people who are uncomfortable with that arrangement, but it's a matter for Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil ultimately to form a government with who they deem to be suitable, and that's who they've chosen to do business with.
There are lots of potential bear traps for this new administration. Housing is going to be a huge challenge. Immigration is going to be a huge challenge. We can hear a protest by individuals just very close to us here who want the Occupied Territories Bill enacted, and it seems that is an issue which has gone to sleep, and the government departments aren't quite sure how they want to progress that, if they want to progress it at all.
Yeah, absolutely. So the programme for government includes a commitment to progress the Occupied Territories Bill. It doesn't include a commitment to enact it. So I think there'll be a lot of pushing paper around for the foreseeable future. Obviously, the government is concerned about the reaction from the United States and from others, and the potential impact on investment in Ireland. There are considerations that are obvious in government, but at the same time, both parties have committed to doing this. So there's a little bit of a bind there, I think, for the government. I think they'll be hoping that the ceasefire in Gaza may give some breathing space. Let's see.
The last time we spoke down here in Dublin was just ahead of the general election on the other side of Christmas, and you said Mary Lou McDonald was Sinn Féin's biggest asset. She did not do as well in that election as she had hoped to, and she's been sent back to the opposition benches for the next 5 years. How does she need to play that role throughout the term of this Parliament?
It's a really difficult one. I think Sinn Féin are in a bind, and I think Mary Lou actually was an asset in the campaign. She's likeable, she's personable, and she actually campaigned very well. And Sinn Féin finished up in second position in terms of seat numbers. Obviously hugely disappointing for the party compared to where they were 18 months before the election, but maybe not quite the catastrophe that they anticipated.
No, but definitely with no chance of being in government.
No, and they will. I mean, the challenge now for Sinn Féin is to position itself as a serious party of government. It's really difficult. They've lost support with the kind of the sort of nationalist, nativist cohort who probably would otherwise vote for the far right, but have been voting for Sinn Féin for the last 5-10 years. How do they sort of consolidate the position as the leading party of the left while trying to rebuild, and how do they offer something different, alternative to the government, which, as I said, is very much a centrist. Sometimes I think it'll be a centre-left government. So I think that's a big challenge for Sinn Féin. They definitely need to refresh their front bench, but they need to refresh their policy agenda, and a lot will depend on how the government performs. So if the government stumbles and fails to address housing, for example, can Sinn Féin come in with some fresh thinking and new ideas on that? Their solutions to date have been very much about spending more and more. The government's doing that, but actually, some of the systemic problems in the system, can Sinn Féin prescribe solutions to those and communicate them clearly, always challenge in opposition. So it's not plain sailing for Sinn Féin in opposition in the coming years. They're going to have to do something different, and I'm not pretending that I can advise them on exactly what they need to do, but if they continue as they're going, then I think that they will be in opposition again in 5 years' time.
Lucinda Crichton talking to me yesterday morning. After the dramatic scenes in the Dáil Chamber, Sinn Féin was accused of subverting the Constitution, a serious charge from Micheál Martin and Simon Harris, and one I put to the party's deputy leader here, Pearse Doherty. Well, Sinn Féin was accused yesterday in the Chamber of subverting the Constitution. How do you respond to that charge?
What happened yesterday is this government displayed an arrogance that was unseen before, where they thought they had the numbers and they could dictate what happens in the Dáil, that they were pulling a political stroke where members who support the government, who have signed and negotiated the programme for government, that they were going to present themselves as the opposition and eat into opposition time. We weren't going to stand for that. We're not going to allow the hundreds of thousands of people who voted for our party and indeed other parties in the opposition to be treated like that way, and that's why they faced a united opposition and were forced to climb down today.
You may or may not have had a point yesterday. Do you accept that your tactics were questionable?
In terms of defending our voters' rights to be heard, to make sure that we are not part of a sham or a political stroke which was tried to be pulled by Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, we succeeded.
And were you sending a very clear message to the government parties yesterday that this is how you intend to play your role in opposition in the 5 years ahead?
There is absolutely no doubt about it. This government is going to see a determined opposition from Sinn Féin that is led for us, but also from others who are not going to stand for the type of shenanigans we've seen yesterday. But what this is about is making sure that we have the time to challenge government on the big issues of the day, on health, on housing, cost of living. How do we project the constitutional question that needs to be dealt with on the island of Ireland? All of these issues are issues that have to be dealt with on the next government. We have no confidence whatsoever that this government will deliver. Indeed, what we do know is they will leave hundreds of thousands of families behind. And yesterday we stood up for those families. Today we stood up for those families, and we won that battle.
Clearly Sinn Féin has the whip hand in opposition, but there are other parties and other personalities on the opposition benches as well, and you need to bear that in mind, and you don't all sing all the time off the same song sheet.
Look, of course we're different parties and indeed there's independent groups in the opposition as well. But what we've seen yesterday, what the whole country seen yesterday, was a display of unity. Yes, Sinn Féin is the largest party in opposition. We lead the opposition, but we work with others, and we will need to be working with others to face down issues in terms of what this government are planning to do, because this government isn't for the ordinary person. That's very, very clear. So they are going to see, as I said, a team of Sinn Féin. We've never had more TDs in the Oireachtas than we have today for the last 100 years, and we're going to make sure that that presence will be felt by the government, not just in opposing them, but putting forward the positive suggestions, the alternatives that this country needs.
Sinn Féin says it's bringing down Conor Murphy from Stormont to the Senate to turbocharge the United Ireland debate. How is he going to do that from the backbenches in the Senate? A lot of people are scratching their heads about that tactic. Can you talk us through the thinking?
Well, first of all, Conor Murphy is obviously a huge presence in Irish politics right across the island of Ireland. The idea of Conor joining us here in the Oireachtas is something that is exciting the whole Sinn Féin team here in the Oireachtas, but also the Sinn Féin membership right across the island. And that debate on Irish unity is alive and is well and is growing every day. The only places it doesn't seem to be growing with the same ferocity is within government parties.
Because it's clearly not a priority for the government parties. It's not in the programme for government.
Look, and what we want to see and what we will be doing is using our influence, and particularly in relation to Conor Murphy's presence, to make sure that this remains and is at the heart of government in terms of their political agenda. We have to welcome other players, for example Leo Varadkar, who was the Taoiseach, and indeed his contributions over the recent times in relation to this debate. This debate isn't going away, indeed it is growing, and government have to realise that they need to get on board with this. So what do we want? We want to see a white paper in terms of Irish unity coming from the government. We want to see an all-party committee. We want to see inclusive dialogue with all of the parties and players who support the idea of a new and united Ireland, and that needs to be led by government. I believe in this term of government we can actually ensure that that happens, and Conor will be playing a very important part in relation to that, but not only just in relation to the discussions, the idea of how we develop the All-Ireland economy, how we make sure that the preparations for Irish unity are properly bedded down, and having somebody who was our chief negotiator here on a daily basis in the Oireachtas participating in those debates is going to be very helpful in relation to that aim.
But the government parties seem to be saying that they will be emphasising the ideals of a shared island. Do you not accept that that has to come first?
But a new Ireland is a shared Ireland. That a united Ireland is a shared Ireland. That's exactly what we want. The Good Friday Agreement has set down the principles of how we achieve that in terms of a referendum north and south. There will be a referendum on the constitutional question. What all of us who agree, and we'll have different views in terms of what that Ireland will look like, but those who want to see the end to the constitutional situation in terms of partition on the island of Ireland need to come together, need to plan, need to debate, need to discuss, and need to put forward that alternative in a clear and coherent way. We in Sinn Féin have been calling on other parties to do that for quite a while, but indeed there has been much advancement, and let's recognise that. Ireland's Future, for example, has been very successful in bringing all of those voices together, including the political voices, on the same stage to articulate those. Now we need to see that developed over the next number of months to bring it into a parliamentary point of view.
Sinn Féin's Pearse Doherty. Let's have a final word with our political editor, Enda McClafferty. Enda, a memorable 48 hours, and memorable, you could say, for all the wrong reasons.
Yes, who would have thought, Mark, that Micheál Martin's return to the top job here in Leinster House would have been more eventful, more dramatic than that of Donald Trump in the US this week. But that's the way it turned out with those chaotic scenes, of course, in the chamber. And though you could argue this was very much a Leinster House bubble story about speaking rights, I think it did give us a sense of the shape of things to come in terms of the debating that's going to take place over the course of the next 5 years. And as well, I think it energised the opposition. They managed to disrupt Micheál Martin's big day, set the agenda, of course. But I think the lasting image might well be that of Mary Lou McDonald standing with the other leaders on the left, if you like, presenting this united front. Something we didn't see in the run-up to the election. Might we have seen more of that? Could it have improved their fortunes on that front? As for Micheál Martin, of course, talking up his Republican credentials today, but making it very clear that the shared Island project is very much his priority for Northern Ireland. There will be no great move toward Irish unity, I think, under his watch here in Leinster House. The key priority, of course, when they return from their 2-week break here in the Dáil, will be focusing on that relationship with the US, because the big economic concerns now about the potential fallout of Donald Trump in the White House.
Enda, thanks very much indeed. That is it. I'll be back at the weekend with Sunday Politics at the usual time of 10 o'clock on BBC One and iPlayer. For now, though, from everyone in the team, thanks for watching. From Dublin, good night.